All right. Well, hello to everyone, and good evening or afternoon, whatever time you may be watching this. Welcome to the Educator's Voice, and I am your host, Frederick Keenan. I have a pleasure and an honor of having a special guest with me today, Dr. Marquise Clark. I'm going to use that term because I know you have a doctorate degree now. So, Dr. Clark is joining us today, and we're going to talk about education. I will not do a bio. I'm going to let Dr. Clark do the bio himself, and that's going to be one of the first questions we start out with. So, welcome, everyone. Welcome, Marquise Clark.
Well, I appreciate you, good sir. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm excited to be here with you and your audience today, and hopefully we can get into some meaningful conversations about education.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, sir. All right. So first, since I did not do a bio, let's get a little bit of bio, and we'll start with just telling us what your current position is now, what your role is now. Tell me a little bit about the work that you're currently doing at this moment. So if you would just talk a little bit about that for me.
Sure. So, currently I'm in my sixth year as the principal at the Cleveland Academy of Leadership. I consider myself a servant principal. It's all about serving others and making sure we create an environment that is conducive for good learning. And so, been here at the school though a total of 13 years. I began my elementary education career here as a second grade teacher, fresh out of Morris College as an undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, I had the privilege of teaching second grade for 4 years, and then was offered the opportunity to join the administrative team as the assistant principal, and I'm now currently principal. And so my work is really about being a cheerleader, supporting others, and making sure families, students, and teachers have what they need to be successful. In many ways, my leadership has sort of grown beyond the four walls of the school to be engaged in the community at various levels, be it advisory, consultant, or even board members to some organizations that are positioned to pull levers to improve the quality of life for our children.
Mm-hmm. You said a mouthful there. Improve the quality of life.
Mhm.
People don't think of that as being part of education. We think about the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, and the math. But you said something pretty profound there. The quality of life is pretty important. I remember, and I'm going to get to the second part in a second. But I remember when we first met. If I'm not mistaken, you were assistant principal when I first met you, I believe.
Mhm.
And I came over to talk to you about the Mister program we had just started, and I came to get some advice. And I think that's how we kind of first met the first time. So, tell me a little bit. Let's go back a little bit further from what your current position is, and just tell me about your. Let's say, tell me about your upbringing. I mean, obviously not from birth to now, but just maybe some basic things about your upbringing, and what brought you to this spot of wanting to be an educator in the first place.
Oh man, great question. So I think at the very core is be honest with you, I'm a country mouse playing the role of a city mouse, right? So I'm a poor country boy from the lower part of the state. Grew up on dirt roads and the backwoods of South Carolina, Clarendon County and Sumter County, Rumini to be specific. We had two stop signs and a liquor store. That was our town.
I love it.
So those are my roots, and so I've always had great times. Fishing in the small water holes on the side of a dirt road, stopping at a bridge or crossing, and just having a few minutes to throw a line out in the water to hopefully catch a nice sized brim or bass. Yeah, that's just been that is life. Um, and so stayed in Clarendon County by way of Rumini for the first 6 years of life, and then moved to Sumter County. And I was in Sumter from the age of 6 until 23 when I graduated college.
Hmm.
And so all of my experience from first grade to college was all in Sumter. I attended Morris College, which is a small HBCU in Sumter County, after graduating Lakewood High School in Sumter School District 2. And so, family was filled with love. Mom, dad was a pastor for 30 30 plus years. He's still pastor
Wow.
back home.
Wow.
Mom and dad were filled with love. I'm the baby of the family, and I thoroughly enjoy being the baby. There are all sorts of privileges that come with being the baby of the family, man.
I
So
bet so. I
uh,
bet so.
a great deal of protection, and you kind of get to say whatever you want to
That's right.
people in the family, and they just kind of dismiss it. But at least you get to clear your conscience and your heart. They just sort of look at you, it's just a baby talking, but it's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Uh, it wasn't when I was getting the hand-me-downs until the hand-me-downs became cars. So once
Hmm.
my brothers started giving me their cars, I didn't mind the hand-me-down so much, and so um, childhood was, you know, like most, we grew up very, very poor. We just didn't have a whole lot. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, we grew up very poor, very rural. Although I'm only 36 years old, I have experiences that mirror that of those who are 50, 60 years old. In that, I grew up with livestock in the backyard, chickens, hogs, you name it, gardens, the sort of things that people did in rural communities. That was my experience growing up, and so quite honestly, I have more friends that are older than 55 than I do that are younger than 55, just
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
we have so many things in common. And I spent a great deal of my childhood around older people, be it my grandparents or my grandparents' friends and their church friends. So um, every now and then, if I'm not careful, I can sound, walk, and talk like I'm a senior citizen. So, uh, but it's been
Yeah.
my childhood was wonderful.
Yeah. I'm laughing because yesterday I had Lyman Dawkins
Mhm.
on with me, and we some kind of way got to talking about you because he was
Mhm.
talking about your mentorship in his life and how you. I think he said you were one of the first people that was he w- under you as a student teacher or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah, he was my student teacher.
Yeah, and so he talked about that, and he mentioned that you were, in his words, were an old soul, and I concurred when he said. I said yes. If you want to describe Marquise Clark, he's an old soul, and you just described it perfectly. That being 36 years old, but able to relate to someone who's 56, and I did not realize that there was that much difference in our age because I'm 57.
Ah,
So that explains because you and I can get together and talk, and it feels like we're just all on the same page, man.
yeah,
So
man. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So what made you want to get into education? What was the
Yeah, so
decision with that?
it really wasn't anything I wanted to do. Um, I had my focus on something else. To be quite honest with you, um, teaching was at the bottom of my three things. I only ever wanted to be three things. I wanted to be a preacher, a politician, or a teacher,
Okay.
and so had no real drive to be a teacher. But my brother, Curtis, who's next to me in birth order, had the idea upon entering high school that we could become teachers and barbers. And his
Hmm.
idea was that by becoming a teacher and a barber, we would have a constant flow of clientele. We could cut our students' hair. And
I
so,
like it.
he had this whole plan. I was like, yeah, whatever, man. I had my eyes on being a politician, being in Sumter. James Clyburn is a
Yes.
monumental figure, and
Yes.
so long before there was Barack Obama, there was James Clyburn, and so he was my political hero and one who I aspired to replace one day in the sixth congressional district. And so, I thought, heck, I'll give poli sci a shot. But between dreams and actualization, my brother somehow became enamored with the lifestyle of being in the streets.
Hmm.
That led him to waver from his path and eventually became incarcerated, got free, and he's currently facing a 20-year bid right now in federal
Wow.
custody. And so then, about 17, 18 years ago, my thought was, well, maybe I'll do this just to prove to my brother that his dream could have been a reality. And
Hmm.
so I sort of shifted gears and pursued education. And so I remember being in high school telling my guidance counselor that I'm interested in becoming an educator. And Brenda Richardson, my guidance counselor at Lakewood High School, said, Marquise, I know a guy at Morris College who's over, they call me Mr. Program, Mr. Rudy Wheeler.
Hmm.
Would you like for me to connect you all? And it's like, sure, whatever, But I kind of had my mind on, kind of spreading my wings a little bit. I had just completed Palmetto Boys State. And so once you do Palmetto Boys State, you get a lot of offers for leadership and scholarships. And so I was really looking to spread my wings. And but I went to Morris College, met with Mr. Rudy Wheeler, and knew then that he was what I needed in my life.
Hmm.
And the restrictive atmosphere of Morris College was also what I needed because I knew myself, to thy own self be true.
Yes, sir.
And I knew what was going to happen to me
Yes, sir.
on a party campus if I could get my hands on leisure pleasure. I was going to be there. And
Hmm.
so, in an effort to complete college and try to make something of myself, I went in many ways to the most restrictive environment. And Morris College is highly restrictive, and it was what I needed. And so, was able to finish Morris College magna cum laude and found myself in Spartanburg only by way of a favor to Mr. Rudy Wheeler, who had gotten a call from the HR director from Spartanburg School District 7, Dr. Wanda Andrews, who said, "Hey, Rudy, can you send us some of your applicants? We really want um, some folks up here to help us in two of our most challenging schools." And so, as a favor to Mr. Wheeler, I had no intentions on coming to Spartanburg. In fact, Mr. Keenan, I didn't even know where Spartanburg was. I
Wow.
honestly
Wow.
thought Spartanburg was near Aiken and Augusta. But when I got a hold of my MapQuest, I printed out the instructions, and somehow I found myself near Greenville. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I came up. The interview was 10 o'clock on a Monday. I didn't leave Cleveland until 12:30. So my interview was 2.5 hours long.
Wow.
And man, I knew that in order for me to be who I believe I needed to be in terms of a Christian, a servant, Du Bois, then being a fresh graduate of an HBCU, had conceptualized the ideal of the talented 10th. And so I felt like, you know, this is where I needed to be to help as many people as possible, particularly those who've been disenfranchised or have
Sure.
been the invisible population for a long time. So this is where I've been since. Hadn't always been peaches and cream. In fact, my
Hmm.
first year, man, I tried to get out of my contract. I wanted to
Really?
leave December of my first year teaching because I felt like it was just too much. And but the rest, as they say, is
It's
history.
history. Yeah.
Had the opportunity, became uh, induction teacher of the year, and district teacher of the year. And so, um, Spartanburg School District 7 has been a tremendous advocate and support of my maturation over the last 13 years of my educational career.
Wow. Wow. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. I'm gonna shift the gears just a little bit and get down to some kind of serious stuff. The stuff that we kind of needed to talk about primarily today, and that is education itself.
Mhm.
And and I think you may have, like I said, you reviewed the question before we got on here, but I'm just going to kind of express my opinions about education from a negative standpoint, if you will. I don't like to use the word. I'm just going to take the, the 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 negative road for just a second. So I too am educated. I have a master's degree in business administration. Have 18 hours above that in marketing. I was never really in education. Never really wanted to be an educator at all. Kind of like you, was not my plan at all. Just so happened I lost my job at Milliken and Company. There was a part-time opportunity to do adjunct teaching at SCC. Took that opportunity because I had no other forms of income at the time. And before you know it, I fell in love with the classroom and being around students. So that's how I got into it. But during that process, in the last year or so, I've started to reevaluate education.
Mm.
I've started to look at education. A lot of people like yourself, myself, we tout education as being the great, I don't know, the great thing that we need to do to be successful, right? We're taught them from when we're kids. You know, you go to school, you get good grades, so you can get a good job. You go to school, you can get good grades so you can be successful. Mama taught you that when you were growing up. And I bought into that. I've got an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, and all of that. But I wasn't truly successful financially the way I needed to be, or at least I thought the way I needed to be. And so I started to question this idea of education. Are we really telling the truth?
Mm.
Are we really teaching kids that if you go to school, get a good college degree, that some kind of that's going to make your life better? Because there's a large percentage of people who have college degrees who are working at Walmart. There's a large percentage of people who went to school all those 4 years and are in debt up to their neck in student loan debt and are nowhere near financially successful that they should be. And so it started me to question this idea of education, not only through the K through 12, but also through higher ed. Okay. So I begin to wonder, is it valuable? Is it something that what we're teaching in school, are they really ever going to use it to be successful when they matriculate into the real world? Like, for example, my grandson who's 12 years old, I was talking to him one day in school and I was asking what he learned. And he said, I don't remember. I don't know what I learned. And then he even said at 12 years old, but, and like most kids, am I ever going to use this stuff when I get to be an adult?
Mm.
Right? Am I ever going to be asked to do a trigonometry problem or geometry problem or know what the MLA format is or APA format? When I go to get a job, are they going to ask me that? Is that something I need to use? So again, I'm not, I'm just not, I'm not quite as adamant about education as I was when I first started in it. So I guess my question to you as we get to that is, what do you feel about the value of maybe the K through 12 first, but then eventually into the higher ed? Do you think college is still a valuable thing that can bring people up? That's something that we need to be continuing to inspire kids and children to do?
I think it's a great question. I think you bring forth some legitimate points that not only are individuals but society as a whole is grappling with. I really do believe and have seen that shift over time. But there are a couple things here. One, I think earlier in the interview, I referenced James Clyburn. Clyburn has been quoted to say that an education is a great equalizer
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
our society. And I believe Congressman Clyburn is right. I'll take it a step further and say I believe an equitable education is a great equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
But then we now have to get into this ideal of what an education really is. And
Yeah.
so um, I think we've used that word loosely and synonymous with obtaining degrees.
Mm.
And by no means would I equate obtaining a degree with an education. In my mind, an education is the ability to be a critical thinker, the
Mm-hmm.
ability to problem solve,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to be empathetic, the ability to feel and see and understand systems, the ability to make complex decisions and to bring forth concepts and
Mm-hmm.
to create somewhat of a intersectionality of various concepts and to get to a place of real truth. And so I never want us to get to a place where we're are uh, seeing those two things as one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most times, the way that the system is designed, most times you do pick up those skills if one is properly educated.
Sure. Sure.
But there are times when folks simply go for degrees and they miss the opportunity. I think the other thing we need to probably understand is that a degree does offer one an opportunity to make choices in life. Those who are classically educated and those who have a degree tend to have more choices in employment than those who do not. And so they get to leverage their expertise, their craft by demanding positions, salaries,
Mm-hmm.
and even schedules. But then also, you bring forth the other ideal of financial upward mobility and financial independence. And then what role has an education played in that regard? And I think education is just like any other tool. You have to know how to use it. A degree is simply a tool. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you use your tool to leverage more money for yourself? And so, I would argue. that anyone who has a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree and feels confined to Walmart have not figured out how to leverage that tool.
Mm,
And
mm,
so it may very well be an individual's limited perspective more so than an individual's, and more so than the system being at fault of limiting an individual. Case in point, when the pandemic hit, I had just finished my coursework for my doctorate degree. So now I was in the phase of writing my dissertation. Pandemic had shut down the entire country, and I had nothing to do but to read. And so I got my hands on Rich Dad Poor Dad
mm-hmm.
by Robert
Good
Kiyosaki.
book.
And so I would not have been able to read Robert Kiyosaki without having an education, right? So the ability to grapple with some of the complex ideas in any literature, let alone Rich Dad Poor Dad. But I'm reading that book, and I'm like, now's the time. And so I started thinking about, okay, what in my life is a liability and what in my life is an asset.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at the money I had, and at the time, I didn't have a lot of money. I was, just finished. I just became a principal, um, and had just a few $1,000s that I could probably invest. And so I never forget the day. Because of the pandemic, folks were kind of offloading a lot of goods. There were things that people were trying to sell because they didn't know when they were going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a nice Toyota Tundra pickup truck that I really wanted, man. I still want a pickup truck. I haven't been able to get my hands on one. And so I'd already had two cars, but I wanted a pickup truck. And so I was negotiating with a guy to buy a truck. And we got to the price of about $4,000. I'm like, nah, I think I'm gonna do it. But then I got word that my cousin was going to sell an 18 wheeler for $4,000. So I'm like, Robert Kiyosaki. So asset liability. What am I
Uh-huh.
going to do? I'm not going to make money with that Toyota, but I can make money with the 18 wheeler. So I took a leap of faith, got the 18 wheeler, and man, that next year, and really for 2 years in a row, I was able. That truck was able to make a significant amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it just blew my mind in terms of what entrepreneurship could bring forth,
Sure.
and what I was able to do with just $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that in mind, I would say I certainly leveraged my bachelor's, my MAT, my EDS in business to start my own trucking company because I understood that the degree was a tool and that there were skills that I picked up that I could use in business, although I was never a business major.
Now, but let me say something about that because that was pretty good. And I enjoyed your explanation about that. But what would you say? If someone argued, yeah, that's great, but you could have read Robert Kiyosaki's book without having to go to get a college degree, right? You would learn how to read through K through 12, but the book, because and the reason I say this is because the word of the phrase public school versus education. Okay,
Mhm, mhm,
public school is just a formal, traditional set of standard requirements that they teach
mhm,
in a school setting. Okay, education is what you alluded to, which is educating my own individual mind. I
mhm,
can do that by reading a Robert Kiyosaki book. I can do that by watching some YouTube channels or things of that nature. So education is different from public school, and I think what we're missing is that we're trying to, or we're failing at, is we're not educating within the public school system,
mhm,
or not giving students the ability to be educated within a public school system because we're just basing it on just standardized and everything is out to be the same. We're killing the creativity and the education piece. Does that make sense to what I'm saying? I mean, do you?
it makes sense. I happen to disagree, though.
Okay.
So, so I would say, because what that can also get us towards is the ideal of vocational training, right?
Yeah.
And so in that case, I like to reference Du Bois. And I know you are a Du Bois fan yourself.
Hmm.
So certainly you remember Du Bois' position on this matter as he and Booker T debated. And so in the first chapter of The Soul of Black Folks, Du Bois makes it clear where he stands on this.
Hmm.
So Du Bois says that it ought to be considered, fair and just that a man have a skilled hand and a
Hmm.
trained mind.
Hmm.
And so both are essential. And I don't think it does our community a whole lot of good to not uplift the benefits of being classically educated, be it K-12 or at the collegiate level. I think what ends up hurting the debate of education is that we, as I said earlier, don't properly leverage the degrees once we are
Yeah.
done. But then also sometimes we don't go get the right degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Speak on that.
so I hurt for when I hear a young person say, "Well, I'm going to school to be a sociology major." Okay, now, baby, I'm gonna just tell you, ain't nothing happening there, right?
Right.
I also hurt when I hear, I hear a baby say, "Well, I'm going to school for fashion design."
Right.
Baby,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
whole lot there, right? And so I'm not sure if we can lay all the fault on our system as opposed to individual choice.
Sure.
But then also, I think we have to pay very close attention to where we decide to go to get an education
Hmm.
and understanding the economic impact of student loans and
Hmm.
how we ought to best leverage our positionality to be better suited. I was able to finish Mars College on owing just $900. That was it. It's all I owed was $900.
Wow. Wow.
But if I had gone to a D1 institution to obtain the same bachelor's of science in elementary education, my student loan debt could have been a healthy $30,000 to $40,000. And
Wow.
so it does matter where we go in terms of positioning ourselves for financial freedom. I get your debate. I think you're right, but I also know that liberal arts institutions are all about strengthening the mind to be a critical thinker in that way.
Yeah.
And so, um, while there are um, stories and a lot of examples we can point to of folks who did not complete college and are wealthy,
Hmm.
I still think we need to think through this in a more strategic and analytical manner and realize that most of your everyday millionaires, most of your everyday Americans who have sustainable wealth
Hmm.
are college educated. And the growth earning potential from those who have a degree versus those who do not is tenfold. And so I know for my little people who are in my household, uh, because I want them to have choice and voice and have an improved quality of life, not only monetarily, but I also want them to be a critical thinker, to be exposed to various literatures, to understand various cultures and art. It is my desire that my children um, get a formal degree in a formal education post K-12 because I want them to be well rounded individuals. Now,
Sure.
if they come to me and say, "Daddy, I want to make a bunch of money," and I'm gonna tell them you need to be an entrepreneur. You need to go
Sure.
out there and get it. You need to have the burn the ship mentality. You've got to go for it. But I would also urge them to realize that both are essential. Roger Milligan.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to read Roger Milligan's will. Have you read it?
I have not his will. I worked for him for about 13 years at Milliken and Company, so I'm familiar with Roger Milliken.
So, did Roger Milligan have a mandate for his children to get a college degree?
I don't think so.
Absolutely. Those Milligan children went to college.
Okay.
So one of the most wealthiest men in the country.
Yeah.
Uh, I think Roger Milliken for 50 consecutive years was on the Forbes 500 list, and one of very few who own $1 billion enterprise that was privately owned. So those children go to college, and so
Hmm.
it would make no sense for a thousandaire to not send his children to college. So I want my children to have access opportunities to be well rounded and exposed.
Well, let me go back to something you said, and we're already at 30 minutes, and I wanted to end at 45, but I can see we're going to have another lengthy discussion here. But I love that you said that college can, or the degree that we encourage children or students to get is a tool,
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to leverage that tool is what makes the degree powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to leverage that degree or use that tool to
Mm-hmm.
get that leverage, then it's pretty much useless. So in other words, other people that we mentioned before that may be saying that college is not valuable, I got my 4-year degree but I'm working at Walmart, you alluded to it perfectly, that means that you just didn't learn how to use that tool,
Mm-hmm.
right? You didn't know how to leverage that tool. So shouldn't we, or do you think we should maybe be teaching students in college that, yeah, this is a piece of paper that you're going to get,
Mm-hmm.
but this piece of paper doesn't mean it's magical, it's going to make anything great happen to you unless you learn how to use it. And maybe we teach them while they're in college, how do I leverage it? Maybe there's a class that says, okay, once you get your degree, this is what you need to do to use this tool wisely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that something that you think could be beneficial?
Oh, I know it is, and colleges do it. Most colleges have a career development program
Okay.
for those students who are approaching graduation.
Mm-hmm.
So they do that. But just like that career center, and just like that degree, you've got to go and leverage it. So if you never go, it'll
Yeah.
never happen for you. I've got a good buddy of mine. I won't just expose his full name, but he and I went to college together, Morris College, and Sammy was your average run of the mill guy, but he was very ambitious. He was a business major, and I never understood why Sammy stayed in the Trio Career Development Center. It just never made sense to me. I'm like, man. And so the next thing I knew, Sammy had landed a job with the Department of Defense
Mm-hmm.
from the Career Center, and Sammy immediately after finishing Morris College was making well into the six figures. I mean, astronomical wealth.
Hmm.
And so Sammy leveraged a bachelor's in business administration from Morris College. Morris College is not known for business administration, right? But there was a career center. There was someone there who had connections, and he worked it and leveraged it. And so from there, he bought real estate in Atlanta, traveled all over the country and the world. His wealth had just exploded. And so I dare say, there are PhDs and folks who are MDs that are
Mm-hmm.
graduates of Morris College, some before Sammy and some after. But um, he's by far probably the one of the wealthiest Morris College graduates because he leveraged that office despite the circumstances. He knew
Sure.
what levers to pull.
Now let me ask you this, since and I want to continue talking about leverage, but that's just something that's so profound to me. I'd never heard it explained that way. That college being something that you should use to leverage your success. But if I'm going to school to be an educator, all
Mm-hmm.
right, if I'm going to school to be, and we both are involved with the Mister program, both love that program. Such an honor to be a part of it still. And they're encouraging young African American males to go into the education field. So if I'm in
Mm-hmm.
the education field, I'm a young 22, 23-year-old African American male. How do I leverage? How do I take that educational degree and leverage that tool into being successful? Because that can be, in a lot of cases, a difficult thing to do with an education degree. So how do I leverage that to become successful?